My name is Selena Hawkins. I'm interviewing Theo Turner on Thursday, October 20th. Will you spell your first name?
Theo, Theo.
Do you consent to having this interview recorded and made available publicly?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to start. Would you mind stating your full name?
My full name
Yes.
is Mr. Theo G. Turner.
If you don't mind sharing, where were you born and in what year?
I do mind sharing. No, I'm just joking. I'm not supposed to do that, huh? I was born in Albion, New York, which is outside of Rochester, New York. What else?
And in what year?
What year?
Yes.
That's personal. Goodness. Wow. The year I was born is in 1969.
Okay, could you please tell me a little bit about your childhood? Where did you grow up? Did you have any siblings?
Yes, I have. There's 8 of us. Well, there was 8 of us.
Okay. What are your parents' names and their occupations?
Arthur Turner, and my father's name was Arthur Turner. My mom's name was Delia Turner. Southern roots.
Okay.
Very southern roots.
Could you tell me a little bit about how a typical day in school was like for you in high school, including after-school activities, what you did before school, maybe after school?
That's a very interesting. You go from childhood all the way to high school. Because I lived in a totally different community that I grew up. Because I moved to the city of Pittsburgh from New York. My mom and dad moved. They divorced. We moved to Pittsburgh. So I went to a high school. My high school was Shinley High School. A typical day? Gosh, that's hard to pinpoint a typical day because every day was different because I went to a Magna program.
Okay.
I mean, there was tons of stuff to do. Me as a person, activity-wise, I played sports. I constantly played sport. I was a 3-sport athlete. I played football, basketball, and baseball. And did that year-round.
Was there any teachers or administrators you liked and anybody that stood out to you?
Well, my head football coach, he kind of took me under his wing for whatever reason. I don't know if it was just because he saw the potential in me, as they say, or just the fact that I was his golden ticket because of my athletic ability. So it was, but he was probably the most instrumental in my life in high school.
Did he say anything to you while you were in high school that like you still remember today or apply today?
Gosh, he's never said anything while I was in high school. But he said something about me when I was in college that I never thought he viewed of me, because it was my senior year in college, and the Pittsburgh Courier, which is a long-time newspaper, minority newspaper in Pittsburgh. If any of you watched the movie, what's the movie about Jackie Robinson? 42. The individual that was following him around was a writer from the Pittsburgh Courier, and so it's a long-standing newspaper in Pittsburgh. They came and did an interview with me, and then they ultimately interviewed him, and he made a statement that they used as the headline for the article: Theo Turner, every father's ideal son. And he basically was explaining some different things of how he, based on my character and my athletic ability and everything that I did and I accomplished, he considered me as he considered me as his son. And I never knew that until I got to college.
Okay, well, I'm going to pass it on to Devin, and he's going to ask you what sports you were involved in as a kid and such.
How you doing, Mr. Theo?
I'm doing fine.
Um, okay, this the questions I want to ask you about your childhood and high school sports. Um, what kind of sport participation were you involved in as a child?
Just the pretty much, I was involved in a lot of different sports, but the ones that was kind of um, strongly encouraged was, of course, football, basketball, and baseball. Um, I played some tennis because I had some friends who played tennis, and I did some other things. But the neighborhood I grew up in, those weren't the type of sports that were strongly encouraged by your peers. So I pretty much stuck with football, basketball, and baseball.
Okay. At what age did you start playing formal sport? And, like you said, what sports were they?
I was pretty when I played a formal sport or more organized. I was probably 12 years old when I played Little League baseball for the first time. Up until that point, I really didn't play any sports because my mom could not afford for me to play any sports. And so finally, my mom was able to scrounge up enough money to allow me to play baseball. And then everything went from there.
So, well, you said your mom, was she the one who influenced you to play sports? Or
no, my brother. One of my brothers. I had two older brothers, and my one brother, he was like really big into sports. He was probably instrumental in me playing sports. I was just satisfied, watching a lot of my friends play, but I just played in, pickup games or whatever else. But he was kind of instrumental in me getting started in organized sports or formal sports.
Okay, so what kind of support did your parents provide for when you played sports?
I'll be honest, they didn't provide a whole lot. My father and my mom, like I mentioned earlier, divorced. So it was mainly my mother who raised us, and she was all about paying the bills and making sure we had a roof over our head and food and all the other stuff. So she was working, she was really grinding to make ends meet. And if you can imagine, there were 7 of us that was living in a 3-room duplex apartment, and not a 3-bedroom, but 3-room. One bedroom, a living room / dining room / family room, and then the kitchen. And that also another / was bedroom, because the girls and my mom slept in the bedroom. Me and my brothers, we slept in the living room / dining room / family room. So we were all shoved in that one little apartment. So that's where it was humble beginnings, I have to say. Very humble beginnings.
And another question was, when did you attend IUP?
I attended IUP in 1989. I came to IUP. I had never heard of an IUP before then, until a coach walked into my high school and started talking about it. And when he said, you should think about IUP, I said, what is an IUP? And he began to explain, and to be honest with you, they sent the right person in to talk to me, because if they had sent any of the other coaches, I probably would have rejected them, like I rejected some of the other schools. But they sent this flamboyant, over-the-top dude with this big old giant arena football ring on his finger. And he was so over the top that I was like, let me just check him out and see what's going on there. And I did, and the rest is history.
So you mentioned other schools. You were recruited by IUP, and what were some of the other schools that recruited you?
Wow. I'll just give you a few of them. At the time, Boston University. West Virginia was big time on me. that's how IUP found out about me, through West Virginia. And that's a whole nother story of why I did not go to West Virginia. Before West Virginia came into the picture, I almost went to West Point. I had already applied. I was already in line to play football for them. To get into places like West Point, you need the recommendation from two of your representatives and your senator. The senator's recommendation carries the most weight. And although I got the recommendation from the two representatives, the late Senator John Hines rejected me. And that's why I didn't go to West Point. Other than that, I don't even remember the names of the two representatives, but I do remember Senator John Hines, the late Senator John Hines. I'll never forget that name.
So, was his rejection letter the reason why you attended IUP?
No. When I did not go to West Point, that's when West Virginia kind of became the front runner in terms of where I was going to go. And so they were, pretty much I had my eyes set on going to West Virginia since I wasn't going to West Point. Some things that happened, and at the time I didn't really understand the whole recruiting process, but when I became a coach, it became clear. But at the time, I was labeled or considered as an athlete. No specific position, but just a guy who was very athletic. You could play just about anywhere. But they wanted to find someone who was a pure quarterback to replace the guy that was soon to graduate from their school, Major Harris. Although I played quarterback in high school, they didn't totally know if I was a quarterback at the next level. So I was going to go there on a scholarship to go there, but when a guy that was supposed to go to Michigan State decided he was not going to Michigan State and became available again, now the scholarship money went to him, and now they wanted me to become there as a partial. And I could not afford to go to West Virginia, even on a partial. And my mom could not afford for me to go to pay the difference without really selling the farm, if I can use that expression. So that's where I said, I'm not going to go to West Virginia. I made up my mind I'm not going to go there. I'm going to look elsewhere. And like I said, they told, because of the connection between their coaching staff and the IUP coaching staff at that time, that's how they found out about me.
Okay. Well, now I'm going to pass on the next set of questions to Charles Cole.
Okay.
Charles Cole, Mr. Theo.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like playing your particular sport at IUP?
Football?
Yes.
It was great. It's probably one of the greatest experiences I ever had as an athlete. To play for 2 national championships, even though we did not win either of them, to be in a game of that magnitude was something that you'll never forget as an athlete. So it was a great experience just playing at the next level, I guess you can say, from high school, and to have the opportunity to contribute as soon as I stepped on the field. That was something that was particularly great for me and stuff, and that it really enhanced the experience.
Okay. What was your typical day like as a student athlete?
Well, most of my classes were in the morning, so basically just get up, you go to class. After classes were done, and you would eat lunch and everything else, I would head down to the football office where I would meet my position coach, and then we would basically go over some academic stuff, and then we would go over, either practice schedules, film study of the previous practice. Then we would go over some of the game film that we received of the opponent that's coming up. So we would study the opponent and do different things, and then after that, just go and get ready for practice.
Okay. What was your major accomplishments as a student athlete?
Major accomplishment. Wow. I'll say this. My major accomplishment as a student athlete was when I got my first A in college. Probably it was during a time where I was really struggling academically, my freshman year. And in my mind, I thought to myself, I could never get an A in college. There's just no way I could get an A in college. And the one class I took called Elementary Functions, which is a very challenging math class. I get my first A. I had the second highest grade in the class. So that was a major accomplishment because you're sitting in the classroom with so many different individuals who I'm sure did not expect me to score like that, because me scoring that high affected the curve in that class. So whatever grade the people under me got, that's what they had to settle with. So usually when you grade with a curve, if the cluster of individuals have a 70%, that's pretty much your B's and everything else, even though it's 70% because you're grading on this curve. But because me and another student got up in the high 90s, we destroyed the curve. So that was like I was hyped. To be honest, I was real hyped because I jacked up the curve for a class, and that just felt really good. And I'm talking about my overall grade. It wasn't just one test. It was the overall grade in the class.
Okay. What was your most challenging aspect as a student athlete?
Wow. Adjusting to the social life of college, because it was just in high school, I felt I had complete control over everything that dealt with me. When I got to college, relationship-wise, it was just like I had no control. It was like all these emotions and all of these ups and downs, and it wasn't like I was like, okay, that's enough. That's it. I'm out of here. Move on. It wasn't your normal high school 3 months, and you move on to the next relationship. It's like different. So that was just a big awakening for me, because relationship was just, I didn't feel like I was this guy that had control over anything anymore. So, and in the 1 year, it did affect my play, because I wasn't as focused. And I remember my one coach, when I came off the field the one time, he grabbed me by my face mask and yelled in my face, "Get focused." Because it was affecting everything that I was doing. What was happening off the field was affecting what I was doing on the field.
What was your most rewarding aspect of being a student athlete?
Graduating. Walking across that stage, man, it was one of the most rewarding feelings, because I really, when I first came to college, I did not see myself graduating from college. I just saw myself playing football. And then whatever happened after, whatever happened. So graduating was a big accomplishment, and it really motivated me to where I am today.
What was your experience like at IUP, and can you please describe what you recall about being a student during those years?
That's a very broad question. In terms of, I mean, I think it's typical at IUP. It's just typical in terms of what's offered to students. I think your experience is what you make of it. If you don't do anything, you're not going to get anything out of this experience. If you're not involved in anything, you're not going to get anything out of the experience. It'll just be, I'm just going to class, boom, 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 and that's it. You have to invest if you would, and I think my experience was such to where it was whatever I put into it, that's pretty much what I would get out of it. In those times where I didn't get a whole lot out of it, it was when those times where I did not invest anything into it. But when I really got involved with different groups, organizations, different things that were going to different programs, even though it wasn't my per se cup of tea, I still went and found out it was something I actually really liked. So being open to do certain things that I normally would not have done, being involved in things that I normally would not have been involved in, it really kind of helped broaden my perspective of life. A lot of the things that I did for the first time ever, I experienced here in college. I flew on an airplane for the first time while I was in college. I had never flown an airplane before until I got to college. I tried certain foods. Some of you know the story about Chinese foods. I didn't try Chinese food until I got to college. Coming out of the city, you would have thought that was like just about every corner you're somewhere you can try certain foods, but I never tried it before until I got to college. So I mean, there was a lot of first experiences that I had when I came to college.
What are some of the significant or memorable events you have experienced while you were a student here? Can you recall any story you remember that will reveal the character of the school during your tenure?
The character of the school?
Yes.
There's one incident. And I had talked about this story before. We had a racial incident up at the Indiana Mall, and there was a lot of issues that they had, not only just with students in general, but more specifically students of color. And there was one particular incident with a gentleman who was up at the mall, and he was approached by the mall security and was treated inappropriately. And what the student body did, which I thought was very unique, it was an immediate response in terms of the students coming together and really, discussing what had happened, the issues. Of course, there was a lot of frustration, in terms of the history of Indiana Mall with students and more specifically students of color. And you saw a lot of students really step up to the plate in terms of being student leaders in that whole situation, really giving valuable input and perspectives on what, everything that was done and what needs to be done. And through the guidance of certain faculty and staff members that were there as well, that's where we came up with the silent march from the IUP campus up to the Indiana Mall, where you had thousands of students. I would say probably about anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 students, and faculty and staff together, including the president at that time, Dr. Pettit, who all walked to the Indiana Mall with a list of demands to, as they approached the Indiana Mall and walked into the mall, presented it to the director or the owner of the Indiana Mall, and then to see the mall respond because of the actions that the students, faculty, and staff did in terms of working together to create change in the Indiana Mall. And so that was one of the very defining moment in terms of my experience at IUP, because to see something just to come out of something like that to really provoke change in this community.
What were your initial expectations in relation to being a student here? Did those notions accurately reflect what you eventually experienced?
Say that again?
What were your initial expectations in relation to being a student here?
Okay.
And did those notions accurately reflect what you eventually experienced?
I would say no, because my expectation coming to college was to play football and to find girls. That's all I was coming to college to do. And I tried to do it as best I could at the time. Had some success, had some failures in that process. And so when I got here, to learn that the perspective of college that I did have was probably about 2% of what college is really all about. And pretty much that's what everybody sees about college before they come, because you see all the movies, all the whatever that's out there, and this is college. And so when we come, we're looking for that 2%. But then we realize that 98% of college is going to class, studying, doing the work, getting involved, networking, doing internships, doing all that stuff to really build you up in terms of your character and really developing you as that future professional. So to find out this is what really college is all about, based on what I did and what I got involved in, it really demonstrated that my perspective coming into this was totally wrong.
What was it like being a person of color at IUP when you were here?
I mean, it was challenging. It was very challenging because you're in a predominantly white environment where you're experiencing individuals who, in some cases, have never experienced live a African American in their entire lives, and vice versa. There's individuals who've never experienced, depending on their communities, you didn't do too much outside of your community. So it was challenging in some cases because you had some biases because of who you are and what you look like, and then on top of that, being an athlete on this campus, that added on to a lot of the attitudes towards myself and even others, because there were some individuals that did not like athletes, and they didn't mind showing it or letting you know about it. So I know for myself, I took certain precautions, I took certain measures to not look like an athlete, but really that I was all about business. When I went into classrooms, I didn't dress like an athlete. I actually got myself up and dressed myself nicely and went to class. I tried my best to be on time, if not early, and then always trying to, in terms of put forth a high quality of work. And so most professors did not even know. And even though they had progress reports, because we gave consent for our coaches to do grade checks and all this other stuff, especially if I was in large classes, I did not make it known who I was. And even though sometimes the professor was like, "Is there a Theo Turner in this room? Theo Turner?" I would not respond because I did not want him or anybody else to know who I was, at least until after the first test. And so I purposely took those type of measures so people would not know who I was and would not judge me. And I sat in the front, in the middle, right in the professor's face. So I wanted him to see me. If I knew the information, I wanted to be the first one to raise my hand. I wanted to do all of that stuff to really tear down some of the stereotypes. But there was some tension, a little bit of tension in terms of the community as well as with some African Americans in the women's institution.
Okay. To follow up on that question, how did athletics intersect with race to influence your experience here at IUP?
How did it intersect with race?
Yes.
That's a very interesting question. Because I don't know if the athletic program, other than, in terms of their hires of minority coaches, there really wasn't a great intersection between athletics and the overall community. But they did try to provide services to meet the needs of those students who were minority. They would go to great lengths to protect us. But overall, I don't know if they really went over and be above interacting with the overall community to really try to bridge race relations or anything else. I don't think that ever happened.
Okay. I'm going to pass it over to Gabe, and he's going to ask you the following questions.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All my questions will be related to after you've graduated. So first question is, what has been your relationship with IUP since your graduation?
I've worked for them. I've never left. When I first graduated undergrad, I went right into grad school. And then I worked for the athletic department as well. And then once I finished my master's program, I went into into student affairs, and I've been here ever since. So I've never left. So my relationship with IUP has been strong since I first stepped foot on this campus. I've never left.
Once you went into students affairs and everything, do you still have any hand or keep in contact with the athletic department? Or
I do. They'll ask me to come and talk to certain athletes and their parents. With football, they'll do that. Basketball, both men and women's, they'll have me do certain things there. So I really stay in connection with them. My office, this office that I work with, we collaborate with the athletic department for events like homecoming and so forth. So we're always in connection with them one way or another. So it's never, it's constant, put it that way.
Okay. You said you have connections then with the current student athletes. Have you seen any of their experience shadow yours, like being similar?
I don't think so. I think it's a lot different because the numbers. When I was here, the numbers weren't as many of the minority players, especially with football. We had a high volume of numbers, but there's definitely more minorities on the team now than it was when I was playing. The interesting thing is, in terms of racism in sports, and I went to the one health and physical education class. The one professor, he had me come to his class to talk because he was doing racism in sports. And he asked me the question in terms of, when have I ever experienced any racism while I played sports? And really, the only racism I experienced while I played sports, especially at IUP, was when we played a historically black school, Virginia Union, and we were out pregame stretching and everything else, and their team came out, and their team ran around us several times and called us Uncle Toms and because at that point of the pregame, it was most of the African American athletes, and so they ran around us calling us Uncle Toms and sellouts and everything else because we were at a predominantly white campus, and they were a predominantly black campus, which was really interesting on a number of different levels because it was just like, wow, this really big scene that was going on there, number one, and then number two, they didn't know what they were getting ready to get into playing against us because we were going to beat the mess out of them, and we did.
So you won the
Because
game.
all you did was just spark a fire that you didn't want to. And so it was very interesting to experience that type of, because I had never experienced anything like that before. It was a different type of racism, I guess you could say. And so that was the first I'd ever experienced anything while I was playing sports. So that was interesting.
Unrelated or related to IUP, are you still involved in sports in any way with coaching or spectating?
I am actually. I do spectate. Actually, in probably another 5 minutes or so, whenever this interview is over, I'll be going to see my son play over at the high school. So I'm always a spectator because I have two sons that are actively in sports. I don't coach anymore. I did coach after I left coaching for IUP. I got into student affairs. I was asked to coach the 9th grade football team here in Indiana. I did that for about 5 years, and then I stepped away to really work with my sons. And as a result of me doing a lot of work with my sons and everything else, birthed a business that I had started called Triple Threat Skills Academy, where we train athletes from as young as 7 years old all the way up through high school. I'm still really active in terms of into sports and everything else. So I'll be actually doing a camp this weekend here in Indiana. Shameless plug.
One of the other questions that we had for you was what role have you put your children into regarding sports? So is it just your boys' football, or?
They play just about any sport they want to, really. They've kind of, my oldest has kind of narrowed it down to football, basketball, and baseball. But he's experienced some other sports. He's experienced wrestling. He's played soccer. My youngest, he's pretty much right now into basketball and baseball. In both of those sports, he's exceptional because he has exceptional hand-eye coordination. And so he's caught the attention of a lot of people already, and he's only 10 years old. So, but he's caught some attention. And so we've been doing a lot of traveling because of that, because he's not only just involved in AAU, but he's also has opportunities to go to these camps where they evaluate you to see how good you really are, and potentially he could be ranked in the country as a result. The more camps that we go to, of course, we would find that out. But I don't have the time nor sometimes the money to be doing a lot of the traveling that a lot of these kids and their parents do. I mean, it's really something.
So you try to give them as many opportunities that you can.
Yes. Try to give them. They have had my sons have opportunities that I'd never had. I mean, I told you guys heard some of my stories, how I didn't start playing sports until I was 12, not because of some of the issues that are today where you don't play football because we want to limit your exposure to concussions and everything else. No, my mom barely had two pennies to rub together to do anything. So I got in late because my mom didn't have the money. But they have, of course, better resources, and so they have better opportunities than I had. so they have definitely more opportunities than I would ever imagine because of their mom and dad has resources that my mom and dad did not have.
Do you still keep in contact with any former teammates or coaches when you're playing at IUP?
Yeah. Two of the coaches for IUP right now, I coached them when they were players here at IUP. So I constantly talk to them. Anytime there's alumni golf outings, things like that, I see some of the guys that I played with. So we keep in touch here and there. It's not constant, but we keep in touch here and there.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add that we haven't touched upon in the interview?
No, y'all were pretty thorough. Pretty good. Good job. Thank you. Pretty good job.
Okay, we'd like you to thank you for your time and sharing your experiences with us in the IUP Oral History Project.